seasons requires different kinds of care. I remember there was a season in my life where I was thriving in one area and the other area I struggled. For instance, mentally, I'm always intentional about what I need to do, but sometimes I struggle physically. So today, I'm going to talk to you about the different kind of self-care, what it is, what does that look like, and most importantly, which one fits best for you based on your current season. If you want to hear more about it, stick around. Hi everyone, if you are new here, my name is Karine, aka Tika, and over here we are building something very special. I created this space for us to learn about mental well-being, self-care, and most importantly, how to continue to prioritize the most important person, and that is you. So today, just like I mentioned, I wanted to go over some different kind of self-care practices that you can do, not just for yourself, but also letting other people know exactly based on the current season that's going on in your life right now, what exactly do you need to continue to thrive? We learned that self-care is not a one-size-fits-all, right? What's good for me may not work for you. What works for someone else may not work for you. So I wanted to kind of go over some tips about 5 or 6 different kind of self-care activities or different kind of self-care routine that you can practice to make it more of a lifestyle for you versus a one-time thing. So let's get into it. The number one self-care activity or the number one self-care topic I want to talk to you about is mental self-care. Like everything starts mentally. Like I've always tell people, we can function without a kidney. We can somewhat function without a finger. If you're missing a leg, you can still function. But your mind, that is the most important organ. When you lose your mind, you're gone. You're pretty much gone. So why do we need to take care of our mind? Why is mental self-care important? Mental self-care is a way that we learn how to nurture our mind, our cognition. How do we make sure that we are working our motor skills, right? So when you think of mental self-care, I want you to think of things that you do to help nurture your mind. So what does that look like? Sometimes if you're feeling stressed, a simple, like you can do a puzzle, right? That's something that you're doing cognitively, that you're working your cognitions. That is a way like you're caring for yourself. You're doing that mental escape. That can also look like you reading a book as well, or you're learning a new language, or if you're like myself, I love watching YouTube videos, so like a DIY segment. So these are things that you do, honestly, to help nurture your mind. So sometimes you may be struggling in different areas of your life, but you know you can't wait to kind of read this book or do this puzzle or trying to learn something new just to help fulfill your mind in a way. And that alone is what we call mental self-care. The next self-care I want to bring forth to you today is emotional self-care. And emotional self-care is something that we do, or activities that we do that kind of help us to nurture our feelings, right? When you think of mental, it's all about the mind. But when you think of emotional, we're talking about our feelings. Sometimes a good cry is important to have. Like if you had an overwhelming day, or or you just happen to overcome something that you had no idea you would have been able to make it. Like we see it all the time, right? Graduation, somebody, if we're looking at the sports arena, like when people win the championship or they're making it to the playoff, you see how excited they get, right? Or they'll cry, right? That's a way of releasing emotions that your body is holding on to, and you learn to release that emotions. So how do we take care of ourselves emotionally? How do we acknowledge the way we're feeling? Number one, you want to acknowledge your feelings. That is a form of emotional self-care. If you're going through something right now, I want you to give yourself grace that if I'm crying, if I'm at peace, if I'm overwhelmed, that's a form of emotions, that your emotions are telling you something. So emotional self-care are things that we do to nurture our emotions. What does that look like? A good cry, or Also, you can also color. I love coloring. You guys know that about me. Journaling, if you enjoy writing or so, or any kind of arts and crafts that kind of help feel your emotions. We see that a lot in artists, like when they go to a horrible breakup. A lot of the time we hear people say, "Oh, I can't wait for this album," right? That's a form of self-care within itself, like putting your emotions into your writing, putting your emotions into your music. So these are ways that we can do to acknowledge our emotions that our space, our body somewhat needs, right? So we talk about the mental self-care. Now we're talking about emotional self-care. The third one I somewhat want to go over is what? Physical self-care, right? A lot of the time we know our bodies are, that's our temple. That's what God say. Our bodies are our temple. So we want to make sure that we are taking care of our bodies. So what does that look like? Anything physical. Last week I talked about sleep. Sleep is a big part of self-care. And what did we say about sleep? Sleep is also free. So making sure that you're getting quality sleep. That is it. That is very important. Making sure that you are staying hydrated. Making sure that you're drinking your water, right? Nutrition is also a big part of that. The way we eat sometimes reflect the energy that we feel, and different ways that our bodies are sending us signals. So if you're the type of person who loves to work out, you like to go on a walk, you like to dance, you like to go hiking, any kind of physical activities that brings you joy, that brings you peace, then I encourage you to keep doing that, because your body needs to be moving. Joyful movement, clarity walk, however we call it. So anything that we do physically is what we talk about physical self-care. The fourth one I want to talk about is spiritual self-care. Now, for me, I'm a woman of faith and I respect everybody's walk of life or background, but anything that somewhat help you connect to a higher power, for a lot of people, whether it's prayer, devotion, spending time in nature, or listening to some gospel music or music alone, that's a way of you feeling connected, right? Feeding the soul, like, reading the Bible, reading something that's close to you, like you feeding the soul, because your soul also needs to be cared for. Your soul needs to be cared for, just as you're taking care of your mind, just as you're taking care of your emotions, your physical part, your spiritual life. Also, everybody somewhat believe in a higher power, so that's what we call spiritual self-care, is when you're connecting to a higher power through your walk of life, your devotion, your values. All of that can fall under spiritual self-care. The last one, or the one more I wanted to talk about, is social self-care. Social self-care, I don't know if you ever meet an extrovert or an introvert somewhat. It's a part of connection. We want to make sure we're connecting. We're not just connecting with anyone, but we're connecting with the right people. So socially, we all need people. Not just people, but we need good people. So how are you connecting? It could be through friends, to organizations, through the workplace, or anywhere there's more than one person that's not you, right? So connecting with people, making sure that you are spending quality time, not just with your loved ones, with the people that brings you joy, making sure that you are growing. It's a part of self-care as well. A lot of the time we hear it's not just what you know, it's who you know, because social self-care is important. Not but not least, is one thing I wanted to talk about is practical self-care. And with practical self-care, that can look like a lot of different ways. That can look like personal development. That can look like, financial well-being. That can look like anything practical, right? Because there's so many different activities, so many different things that we talk about. But practical is like, for a lot of people, anything that makes sense to them is a way of them practicing self-care. If it doesn't make sense, they're not doing it. I'm one of those people. I can be very practical. Like, for me to do something, I'm a planner at heart. So I like to plan because I want to know what I'm going to talk about. So anything that falls under that realm is a way of being practical, right? So all of these are different ways when we talk about self-care, that it's not a one size fits all, but it's something that you need to feel like you belong. We talk about mental self-care, right? We talk about emotional self-care. We talk about physical self-care. We talk about spiritual self-care. Also, we talk about social self-care, and the last one was practical self-care, right? Eventually, I want to start creating different videos that kind of go deeper into that, but since we are building a self-care, a lifestyle, I wanted to kind of go over them today so you know exactly what some of them look like. And as you are thinking about the things that I'm talking about, hopefully you're taking some notes, you like watching this and you pausing as I'm saying things. That way you know exactly, okay, which area of my life that I struggle with and which area of my life that I'm thriving. If you're thriving in this area, keep doing that. And if you're struggling, then look into what can I do to make sure that I'm feeding not just my mind, but I'm feeding my soul, I'm feeding my emotions, I'm making sure I'm socially connecting with someone or with a group of people to kind of help build the lifestyle that I need to continue to build when it comes to taking care of myself. And now, ladies and gentlemen, this is my favorite part of Self-Care with Tika, and that is a sip of self-care segment. So grab your tea, grab your cup, and come back on the couch so we can practice some self-care. Now that you grab your drink, I want you to grab a pen, a paper, or your iPhone, whatever that you need to write down. I want you to kind of think of all the things, of all the self-care activities that I just spoke about, or the self-care titles that I just went over. Which part that you feel like you have been neglecting? For instance, if physical self-care is something that you feel like you may have been neglecting, like you haven't been moving so much, or you haven't danced if you enjoy dancing, or you haven't walked, I want you to think of something based on what I talked about that you have been neglecting. Write it down right now. And now that you wrote it down, you are aware that you haven't been connecting, or you haven't been eating the proper nutrition, or whatever that it is that you wrote down. I want you to think of one small way or two that you can do this week to nurture that. If you haven't walked in a while, maybe you can walk during your lunch break tomorrow. If you haven't talked to somebody that you've been thinking about calling, maybe it might be the time to talk or call that person. If you haven't read a good book, maybe it might be the time to go back and read. Whatever that it is that you felt like you have been neglecting, I want you to take a moment right now, write it down, and find one of two ways that you can find a way to nurture it this week. And that, my friends, is what we call what? A sip of self-care. All right, friends, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you felt empowered, seen, and most importantly, with everything that I talk about, the goal is not for you to do all of it at once or all of it perfectly. The goal is to bringing attention to which area of what we talked about today, what needs attention, and what can I do about it. So thank you all for coming and pose with me. I'll see you on the next video. Bye.